Manager humiliates a man in the store. The next day, a helicopter lands, and she is speechless when he steps out. Lisa Thompson was in the store, her piercing gaze scanning every corner of the space like an eagle hunting for prey. The clothing store, one of the most popular establishments in the small town, required its manager to maintain an impeccable standard. For Lisa, each customer was a reflection of the image she wanted to project, and she was determined to ensure that nothing or no one compromised that. With her hands on her hips, she watched the customers coming and going, evaluating them with an air of disdain. The store was organized with almost military precision. Racks were arranged in perfect rows, each piece of clothing aligned as if they were soldiers in formation. The carefully crafted displays showcased the latest fashion trends, reflecting the sophistication that Lisa valued so much. Every detail was meticulously planned to attract a specific audience, an audience that, in Lisa's view, should meet the standards she herself set. It was then that the door opened. A plain-looking man walked in. Joe, a man of medium height, disheveled hair and somewhat worn clothes, seemed out of place among the well-organized shelves and elegant displays. Lisa frowned upon seeing him, an involuntary disdain taking over her expression. What is he doing here? Thought, already anticipating the scene that would unfold. Good morning, Joe greeted, trying to smile, but his tone was timid, and his voice almost got lost in the jingling of the store's bells. He headed to the jacket section, the look of determination, as if he knew exactly what he wanted. Lisa, in turn, seized the opportunity to approach him, her gaze sharp as a knife. Can I help you with something? Lisa asked, her tone mixing sarcasm and disdain. Joe looked up, surprised by her tone, but still responded earnestly. I'm looking for a winter jacket. Something that's durable, you know? I don't want to be cold this year. What do you think you'll find here? Lisa replied, crossing her arms. We have an excellent stock. I'm not sure we have anything that would fit you. Maybe you should try a thrift store. The suppressed laughter of some nearby customers mixed with the awkward silence that followed. The humiliation was evident, and Joe's expression grew darker. Look, I just want a jacket. I'm not here to cause trouble, he said, trying to stay calm, but his words sounded like an echo in a space that had turned hostile. Trouble? Don't worry, you won't cause any trouble here. In fact, the problem is you not realizing that this type of store is not made for people like you. Lisa continued, her challenging gaze fixed on him. A murmur of disapproval began to spread among some customers, but Lisa didn't seem to care. She was in her comfort zone, and any sign of weakness was an opportunity to reaffirm her control. Joe took a deep breath. He wasn't the type of person who liked conflict, but he also wasn't willing to bow down to someone so arrogant. I just want a jacket, please, repeated, his tone now firmer. The tension was rising. Lisa, seeing that Joe wasn't going to back down, decided to end it quickly. If you can't afford a decent jacket, maybe you should rethink your priorities. This is not a place for dreamers, she shot back, her voice sharp as glass. The atmosphere in the store became heavy, and some customers began to look away, uncomfortable with the scene unfolding before them. Joe felt the heat of embarrassment rising in his face, but he decided he wouldn't let that woman's arrogance defeat him. He simply shook his head, grabbed a jacket within reach, and headed to the checkout, trying to ignore Lisa's disdainful gaze. The heavy silence that followed his departure was like a scream of indignation echoing off the store walls. As he walked away, feeling of disrespect and humiliation lingered in the air, and Lisa, with her unperturbed expression, didn't realize she had sown a seed that could germinate to something much bigger than she imagined. There, in the small store, an unusual encounter was about to trigger a series of events that would change their lives forever. Charlie, the store janitor, watched the scene with a mix of indignation and sadness. He knew the store's routine, the dynamics between customers and employees, and he knew Lisa's arrogance was nothing new. However, the public humiliation that Joe faced that day struck him more deeply. He remembered how many times he had seen people treated as if their lives had no value. And the scene unfolding before his eyes was just another example of the disdain some have for those who don't fit into society's standards. You don't know who you're talking to, you miserable wretch, Lisa had shouted. eyes filled with contempt. Charlie felt a knot form in his stomach. He wanted to intervene, but hesitated. How could a simple janitor confront the store manager? But at the same time, the image of Joe, embarrassed and downcast, wouldn't leave his mind. Once the interaction between Lisa and Joe ended, and the simple man left the store with the jacket he had bought, Charlie decided he couldn't remain silent. He approached Lisa, who still had her arrogant demeanor, as if nothing had happened. "Lisa, you can't treat people like that," Charlie said, his voice firm but respectful. She turned to him, a sarcastic smile on her lips. "Oh, Charlie, the janitor who thinks he can give me moral lessons. You don't understand how the world works. People like him need a bit of reality." "Reality? Do you think humiliating someone is reality?" Charlie replied, indignant. "Joe may not have your style, but he deserves respect, just like any of us." Lisa rolled her eyes. "You're being ridiculous. Now, if you don't mind, I have work to do." And with that, she walked away, leaving Charlie alone, frustrated and worried. After Joe left, Charlie couldn't stop thinking about the man. Something about him seemed out of the ordinary. He had noticed a gold necklace that Joe wore, discreet, but with a shine that made him look different from his simple appearance. Who is he really? Charlie murmured to himself as he began to clean the store floor. The other employees started to gather in small groups, commenting on what had happened. "What Lisa did was horrible," said one of the saleswomen, her disapproval clear. "He was just looking for a jacket." "And, did you see that necklace he was wearing?" asked another, intrigued. "I think he might be someone important in disguise. Or, he could just be an ordinary guy trying to protect himself from other people's arrogance," added a third employee, shaking her head in disapproval. "But Lisa doesn't need to be like that. She already has power. She doesn't need to crush others." Meanwhile, Charlie headed to the stockroom. He wanted to think of ways to comfort Joe, even though he didn't know how to find him again. "Maybe I can leave a note in the store in case he comes back," he thought as he organized some boxes. He deserves to know he's not alone. The day went on. The atmosphere in the store had changed. The air of superiority that Lisa used to exude was now tinged with discomfort and doubt. The employees spoke in whispers, and concern hung in the air. Charlie felt that Lisa's attitude had crossed a line, and the idea that Joe might be more than he appeared wouldn't leave him. As closing time approached, Charlie decided he couldn't leave the situation unresolved. He needed to act. As he was leaving, he spotted Lisa at her desk, reviewing some reports. With a deep sigh, he walked over. "Lisa, we need to talk," he said, his voice firm but calm. She looked at him, her eyes full of disdain. "What do you want, Charlie? I'm busy." "I want you to think about how you treat people. What happened today was unacceptable. And it's not just about Joe. It's about all of us," he said, feeling a wave of courage. "Respect is fundamental, and you're losing it." She hesitated, the expression on her face changing slightly, but she quickly recovered. "I don't need your advice, janitor. You know what? You should know your place." Charlie turned and left, part heavy. But inside him, a small spark of hope ignited. He knew that changes were coming, and that somehow Joe, even if he didn't know it yet, could be the key to a new beginning. After Joe's departure, the atmosphere in the store had become heavy, almost palpable. The employees, who had previously chatted animatedly about the displays and the latest collections, were now whispering among themselves, exchanging worried glances. Lisa, with her arrogant demeanor, seemed oblivious to the turmoil that had formed around her. She was organizing merchandise with an almost obsessive precision, but her mind was far away, lost in thoughts about the upcoming board meeting. "Did you see how she treated that guy?" One of the saleswomen, Megan, murmured disdainfully. "It was inhumane. He was just looking for a jacket." "Yeah, Lisa went too far this time," replied Mark, a young employee who had a habit of avoiding conflict. "But she's the manager. We can't do anything." "That's where you're wrong," intervened Charlie, the janitor, who always observed everything from a corner, but never failed to be a keen listener. The way she spoke to him was unacceptable. No matter who it is, everyone deserves respect. The other employees exchanged glances, surprised by Charlie's stance. He was known for his humility and kindness, but few knew he also harbored a deep sense of justice. "And that gold necklace he was wearing?" he continued, catching the others off guard. What do you think that means? He could be someone important in disguise. Do you think he stole it from someone? Megan asked. Curiosity piqued. Guess we'll never know. Meanwhile, Lisa remained in her trance, only pulled back to reality when her phone vibrated on the counter. It was a text message from one of the directors, reminding her of the afternoon meeting. She took a deep breath, adjusted her blazer, and thought, another opportunity to show who's in charge here. However, a twinge of unease accompanied her, a feeling she couldn't quite identify. Lisa? Mark called, hesitantly. Aren't you worried about how things are here? What happened to that man was, well, very ugly. He turned to him with a challenging look. Look, Mark, I don't have time to worry about people who don't know how to dress. What matters is that we have targets to meet. Let's focus on the meeting, not on some random customer. But he wasn't just some random customer. He was here, and you were cruel, Mark insisted, his voice rising in intensity. People are going to talk. This could affect the store. I don't care what people say, Lisa replied coldly, which only made her seem more distant. What matters is what the board thinks. If I weren't here, you wouldn't even have a job. Charlie, who had been listening to the conversation from a distance, couldn't help but feel unsettled. He always believed that the success of a store did not depend solely on numbers, but rather on how customers were treated. I think you're mistaken, Lisa, he said, stepping closer. Respect is the foundation of everything. You might be successful now, but in the long run, how do you expect that to work? The whole town is talking about you. And who cares? Lisa retorted, now irritated. You're making me lose focus. What we need is results, not debates about respect. Maybe, but one day you may find that respect is all you really have, Charlie replied, his words laden with wisdom he had acquired over the years. He turned and went back to his work, not without leaving a seed of doubt in Lisa's mind. Meanwhile, the board meeting was approaching, and Lisa was preparing, reviewing her notes. However, in her gut, an unease persisted, a feeling that this day could change everything. She didn't know it, but fate was about to present her with a lesson she would never forget. The shadow of a simple man, but possibly extraordinary, loomed over her life, and she was about to discover that respect was not merely a matter of hierarchy, but a fundamental human need. The day began like any other in the small department store, but something in the air felt different. Lisa Thompson, the manager, was in her office reviewing reports when a deafening sound broke the monotonous routine. The noise of a helicopter cutting through the sky made everyone in the store look up, confused and intrigued. Curiosity quickly spread among the employees and customers, who began to gather at the entrance. What's happening? Asked a customer, her eyes wide as she tried to see through the crowd. It looks like a helicopter is landing in the parking lot, responded one of the employees, his tone mixing astonishment and excitement. Nervous, Lisa left her office and joined the commotion. A knot in her stomach made her wonder if this event was somehow linked to the humiliation she inflicted on Joe the day before. What started as a simple sale had turned into an episode she would prefer to forget, but now it seemed to be coming back to haunt her. As the helicopter landed, the employees and customers began to move away, creating space for the aircraft to stabilize. The noise of the rotors slowly diminished, but the anticipation in the air only grew. Lisa felt as if she were stuck in a nightmare, her heart racing with each passing second. She tried to calm herself. The thought that Joe might be connected to all this tormented her. Meanwhile, the crowd around watched every movement, absorbing the scene unfolding like a movie. The atmosphere was charged, and the anticipation was palpable. Joe was about to reveal something that would change everything. And Lisa, whether she wanted to or not, was already beginning to feel the consequences of her choices. Sound of the helicopter rotor began to fade, but the tension in the store was rising. The air was thick with anticipation and disbelief as employees and customers crowded at the entrance, all eyes fixed on the man approaching. Joe, or rather, Joseph Reed, descended confidently, wearing a perfectly tailored suit that accentuated his imposing stature. The contrast with his previous appearance was shocking, and even Lisa, who had always considered herself in control of the situation, was paralyzed. Murmurs began to echo among the customers. "Who is this man?" Woman next to Charlie asked, who was as surprised as the others. He stared at Joe, trying to process the drastic change in the figure that had once seemed like just another customer. "Is it the same guy from that jacket?" a staff member whispered, as curiosity spread like wildfire. Lisa, still unable to move her lips, felt her heart race. The man she had belittled was now standing before her, and the aura of power radiating from him left her uneasy. Joe walked with steady steps toward Lisa, finally managed to look away, but not before noticing the determined expression on his face. "Lisa Thompson," he began, his deep, firm voice reverberating in the silent store. "You remember me?" Lisa swallowed hard, finally finding the courage to respond, though doubt was written all over her face. You are?" "Joseph Reed, CEO of Reed Retail Corporation," completed, a glimmer of disdain in his eyes. "And I had the displeasure of witnessing your lack of respect and dignity toward a customer." Customers and employees exchanged astonished glances. Some were in shock, while others appeared intrigued by the revelation. Lisa tried to compose herself, but the words seemed to have vanished. The pride that had always sustained her was now crumbling. I didn't know. If I had known, I would have." "Would have what, Lisa?" Joe interrupted, the coldness in his voice cutting through her attempts at defense. "Would you have treated me with respect? Or would you have been like everyone else who only sees the surface and judges without knowing?" He paused, observing the expression of regret that was beginning to appear on her face. "The truth is, you haven't learned that a person's worth is not in their appearance, but in their character." Murmurs intensified among those present. The tension was palpable. Charlie, who had been watching everything from a distance, felt his heart race. He knew Joe had a story, a dignity that few were capable of seeing. Now he was about to make a crucial point. Joe then turned to Charlie, who was by his side. "And you, Charlie, were an example of what it means to treat others with respect. You cared about a customer, even when he didn't seem to be someone important. That's why I'm pleased to promote you to store manager." The applause began to echo, and Charlie looked visibly moved. I don't know what to say," he stammered as the rest of the store congratulated him. Charlie's transformation into a leader seemed even more significant next to what was happening with Lisa. She felt smaller and smaller, the weight of her actions piling up in her chest. "Now, as for you, Lisa," Joe continued, turning his penetrating gaze to the manager. "Considering your unacceptable conduct and the way you treated a customer, I am here to demand your immediate resignation." The silence that followed, deafening. Joe's words hung in the air, and Lisa felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. The reality of what was about to happen began to sink slowly into her mind. She tried to protest. The words failed her. What could she say? How could she justify her behavior? "I am the manager of this store. This isn't fair," she protested, although her voice was filled with desperation. "I have always done my best for the store." "You confused your role with power. What you didn't realize, Lisa, is that true leadership comes from respect and empathy, not humiliation," Joe replied, unshaken. "I hope you take this lesson with you." As Joe walked away, Lisa stood there, paralyzed, with the reality of her actions unfolding before her. What had once seemed like an ordinary day had now turned into a turning point, and all eyes were on her, waiting for what would happen next. The atmosphere in the store, once vibrant and full of life, was now tense, thick with an almost palpable silence. Joe, or rather Joseph Reed, CEO of one of the largest retail chains in the country, was staring at Lisa with a look that mixed disappointment and determination. Took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. "Lisa," began, his voice firm, "I demand your immediate resignation. The disrespectful treatment you offered to a customer is unacceptable under any circumstance." The customers and employees who had been watching the encounter with a mix of curiosity and fear were now exchanging surprised glances. Lisa, paralyzed, finally found her voice. "You can't do this. I am the manager of this store. I won't allow you to fire me with a snap of your fingers." She tried to maintain her composure, but anger and shock mingled on her face. Joe remained unfazed. "Oh, but I can, Lisa, and I will do it. The way you humiliated that simple man was unacceptable. Respect must be the foundation of any business, and you, as the manager, should be the first to exemplify it." He paused, observing her look of disbelief. And one more thing, he continued, turning to Charlie, who was watching the scene with an expression of anticipation. Charlie, you stood out in this situation. Your kindness and respect for a customer deserve to be recognized. From today on, you will be the new manager of this store. A wave of murmurs swept through the store. The employees, who had once feared Lisa's power, now looked at Charlie with admiration. He was stunned, unsure of how to react. I don't know what to say, he murmured, looking at Joe with gratitude. Thank you. I just did what was right. And that's what everyone should do, Joe replied, his tone now softer. The success of any business doesn't depend solely on numbers and profits, but on how we treat people. Every customer that walks through those doors should be treated with dignity and respect, regardless of their appearance or status. Lisa Thompson had always been a strict woman, both with herself and with others. But this rigidity didn't come from nowhere. It was shaped from childhood. Lisa grew up in a household where success and perfection were not just expected, but demanded. Her father, a retired military man, firmly believed in discipline as the only path to achieving anything in life. From an early age, Lisa learned that mistakes were not tolerated. Her father, a stern man, was always there to point out failures, and praise was rare. He taught her that the world does not forgive weaknesses, and that only the strongest and most disciplined can thrive. This mindset led Lisa to shy away from any kind of vulnerability, believing that to be successful, she needed to be relentless, both with herself and others. When she began working, Lisa carried this mentality into the professional environment. Her maintaining high standards and demanding the best was the only way to ensure success. She viewed her attitude as something natural, an extension of what she had always known. Treating employees and customers with coldness and disdain seemed to be the price to pay to maintain control and achieve her goals. But behind this facade, there was a constant feeling of dissatisfaction. Lisa never allowed herself to question her father's methods, or the lack of affection that marked her childhood. She believed that her success in her career validated all the harsh lessons she had learned. However, over time, the lack of true human connections began to weigh heavily. The encounter with Joe Reed and the consequences of her actions triggered an internal crisis. For the first time, Lisa was confronted with the reality that her behavior, shaped by years of rigid discipline, was driving people away and creating a toxic environment. Joe's humiliation in the store and the reaction of the other employees were a mirror reflecting her own insecurities and the pain she had carried since childhood. This moment of crisis forced Lisa to revisit her past, question her father's lessons, and to consider whether the path she chose truly made her happy. She began to realize that the relentless pursuit of perfection, instead of strengthening her, was isolating her from everyone around her. Lisa, now in shock, finally began to understand the gravity of her actions. Memories of the humiliation she inflicted on Joe haunted her, and she found herself surrounded by a feeling of regret. I didn't know who you were, she finally managed to say, her voice trembling. I just wanted to keep the store in order. Keeping the store in order doesn't mean disrespecting others, Lisa replied, his gaze still firm. All stores have their rules, but the way you relate to people defines the environment. You had a chance to be a leader, but you chose to be an oppressor. Joe's words echoed off the store walls, and many present felt a weight lift. Lisa looked around, seeing the support Charlie was receiving from his colleagues, and realized she had lost their respect. The deafening silence was broken by a murmur of approval that began to spread among the employees. I understand I was wrong, she finally admitted, her voice almost inaudible. I just wanted to do my job. And now you must face the consequences, Joe interrupted, without resentment, firmly. Take a step back and reflect on your actions. That is the first step to learning and becoming a better person. With her head down, Lisa turned and left the store, passing Charlie, who looked at her with a mix of pity and relief. Joe then turned to the employees, his features relaxing. Let's reframe this store. We need an environment where everyone feels welcome, a place where respect prevails above all. The team began to applaud, and the energy in the air shifted dramatically. Joe smiled, satisfied with the transformation that was already beginning to take shape. He knew that the road to change wouldn't be easy. He was determined to lead by example and ensure that every customer who walked in was treated with dignity. As the store prepared for this new phase, Joe felt at peace. He had not only regained his dignity, but had also provided a second chance. Everyone involved. From that day on, the store would be a reflection of their values: respect, humility, and dignity. And that was the true victory. Do you think something similar could happen in the place where you live? In your community, is it common to see attitudes and judgments based on appearance? How do you believe people would react to a situation like Joe and Lisa's? If you enjoyed this story full of twists and life lessons, don't forget to leave your like and comment on what impacted you the most. Subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming inspiring stories.